Well, good morning, folks. Welcome to Leading Your Best Life. Leigh Farnell here, and I'm with John Denton again. John and I did a session a month or so ago, and we covered so much territory. We said there's a whole lot we haven't covered. We want to talk about that today. So, John, welcome back, mate.
Yep, thank you, Leigh. It's great to be back.
Right. How's life been for you in the last couple of months? Keeping you busy? You got your clients, so you're out busy this morning as well at meetings. You just don't stop.
No, I can't afford to stop. It's been really busy. There's a lot of business owners now starting to look at, what am I going to do? How am I going to retire? How am I going to get out of my business? And how am I going to have a life? Particularly the more mature age business owners. And the economy is getting tighter. There's a whole lot of pressures on small business owners at the moment. And so, they're looking at their options.
And as you say, I mean, it really is. People get so immersed, and we're all like it. One, we don't want to be working for a boss, or we want to be working for ourselves. So that's been a decision we've made in our whole career, that we want to make our own decisions, fall on our own sword if we have to. But at the same time, the plan to actually get out, that thought, because people, as Michael Gerber says, so busy working in the business, day in, day out, the next client, the next bill, the next BAS statement, all of those things. But the working on the business to create an asset so that they can leave. It's like, if it's not in your mindset, and I imagine that's what you bring to the table, is got people to go, let's think about life outside of this business. What do you see their eyeballs roll at times, like, well, I've never really had that thought?
Absolutely, yes. It's my recent blog and newsletter was talking about it needs to be in your strategic planning. Because otherwise I get these too late calls, what I call too late calls.
Yeah,
it's where suddenly an owner has to sell, or they suddenly decided that it's time to retire, or worse still, they're already started on the sale process. And it's like a ski jump. Once you get on the thing, it's difficult to stop. But if you're not prepared, you're probably going to have a crash landing at the bottom. I mean, I was recently contacted by a business owner that have had the business on the market for 2 years. They reduced the price quite dramatically in January this year. They still haven't sold the business. And having had a quick look at it for them, it's just that lack of preparation and thought beforehand. So, and that's a very common thing. Yeah.
And we talked about this in our last podcast, folks. You really should take a listen to that last one. John is such an expert in the area of preparing businesses for sale. And what's that line you have? A business that's ready for sale. I think it's on your website there. What's that line you've got?
A business that's ready for sale is well worth keeping. Because again, it's not necessarily about selling it, but I find when business owners have done the work and they have got it ready for sale, it's like, oh, this is a really good business. And now I'm not working in the business all the time. Maybe I should keep it. It just gives the owner options on what they do from that point on. And they're not just battling to pay the next BAS and to pay the wages and things like that. They're actually having a life as well as a business.
Right. That's beautiful. I mean, you're making me think of Einstein's quote, the problems we have facing us must be solved with a different level of thinking, a different consciousness than the consciousness that's created these problems. And what you're bringing to the table is a different level of thinking, a different level of consciousness. And that very paradigm you've just talked about, where someone goes, wow, I've now got a business that I actually don't have to work in. That's a whole thought, a paradigm I've never considered before. And as you say, then all of a sudden, well, if it's working beautifully without me, why wouldn't I just let it keep working? And that becomes my superannuation, where there's my passive income, which again is another paradigm that many times people don't have. Is, how do I have passive income? I'm retired, but I've got a great income coming in from the business or from investments or a combination of those things, which again is that consciousness, that thinking that I think you bring to the table. What do you say about that?
Yeah, my job is to get people to think and think differently. And, I've even got a website, think.johndenton.com.au, because it is such it's a key thing. And when you're working in the business all the time and you got your head down and you bum up, that sort of lateral thinking, or the thinking about the alternatives, just doesn't happen. And it's not until people have that breakthrough, if you like, in their thinking, that they start to make progress. It's easy to keep doing what you've been doing, but if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get the same result.
Yes, and as I said, that is the definition of insanity. Is I'm not happy with my life and my business, and now I'm on this treadmill, but I don't know how to get off. Which, of course, is part of what you bring to the table, is that outside coach. Which, again, interestingly, talking about coaching, a lot of the people in my swim group have got better because they've been going to a coach. So I went, stuff this, I'm going to go to that coach. So last week I went and did a swimming lesson. Here I am at 67 years of age, who's been swimming my whole life. I go to the swim coach and she's changed my hip rolls. She's changed my rotation. She's changed. I went, what the hell? How good is this? But it's like, who coaches the coach? And if you don't take that time out to get a coach to do just what you're doing, and in here, it's not just, improve your swimming style and so you can swim to Rottnest. Here, we're talking about how you're going to spend the last 10, 20, or 30 years of your life in comfort and pleasure and joy and lack of stress, or are you going to be on a treadmill feeling like you're in a prison up until the day you die? And these are choices. And again, it's people having the courage, and I'm talking to myself at the same time, is, are you willing to invest some time and money in yourself and your future? Or even better to say, how much is your future worth? Is it worth investing in? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite, so I've got lots of them, little sayings is, a fish can't see water.
Mm.
And it's the same with business owners in businesses. They just can't see things from that outside perspective. Yes, I mean, it's the same with, that's what a coach does. They're standing outside of you and showing you what they're seeing and giving you that different perspective on things. I mean, it's just so valuable. Like it happens in sport, it happens in business, it happens in life. If you don't take that step of getting someone external to have a look, then yeah, a fish can't see the water. You can't see the wood for the trees, whatever metaphor you want to use.
It's insanity. It's insanity, but you don't know how to get out of it. And
Correct.
and again, often the coach, I like Sadhguru talking about, when you're going to climb Mount Everest, best go with a guide who's been there before. And in your case, you're the guide who many, many times have taken people through this maze, through this journey to create this entity that then either can be sold or not be sold. But the person doesn't have the knowledge or the skills to do it themselves. Because again, if they had the knowledge and skills to do it themselves, and I'm talking to myself again, if you had the knowledge and skills to do it yourself, you would have already done it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was a business owner in a partnership. We decided it was time to sell the business. We got together with a goal to build it up and sell it. And we put it on the market, but we didn't know what we were doing. And we spent 6 months on a really serious emotional roller coaster, and fortunately didn't sell. And when the last people went away and set up in competition with us, we decided it was time to get help. And that's when we went and got advised to go and see a good business broker. And, the business broker told us we were selling it too cheap, put 25% on the price, put us through a process, and it sold. And it was such a big learning that's what I now pass on to business owners. And then, of course, I went broking, and as a business broker, then as well as a coach, and just seeing how little business owners really know about the sale process and how to value a business. That whole thing. You don't know what you don't know. And you may only sell a business once or twice in your whole lifetime.
Yes, Yes, it's like saying I'm only going to do one or two golf shots in my lifetime, but I want them both to be perfect to go down the middle. It's not going to work that way. So what you basically say, what you're doing is you're buying the experience of the coach and the broker. So, mate, we covered a lot of that in the previous session, and what we
Yeah.
want to do, otherwise we'll talk about that again today because it is so fascinating. But guys, do check out the previous podcast, and I'll put the link to that in this podcast. But what I wanted to talk about here was one of the things we touched on last time was your sales journey and sales experience and sales process. So I wanted to delve down a bit more into that, John, in terms of, mistakes you see people making and some of the things you do that facilitate that is your, I suppose I call it above the water. What are the things you do? But also below the water, what are the things, how you think about the sales process? What are some of the tips or processes that you use that help you and have helped you over the years in terms of your sales process?
Yes, selling is an interesting one, isn't it? I think a lot of people as well. I think the art of selling has probably died off a bit. People started to rely too much on the internet, and if I've got a good website, it'll do the selling for me. It's just not the case.
Mm,
And what comes up all the time when I look at businesses is there needs to be a sales process.
mm,
You know, a documented, structured
mm.
sales process. I went from engineering into sales. We had that conversation last time, and getting your head around following a process, having a structure to work to, and measuring what you're doing and measuring the results. It's just absolutely critical, and it's so lacking in a lot of businesses. And so when it does come to the sale of the business, the potential buyer wants to be able to see how the business makes its sales and gets its business, and the potential buyer wants to know that they could come in and see that process continue. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely. Yeah. As you say, because I mean, I think, a friend of mine just sold his fluid, was a waste fluid business, and the person coming in, um, as you say, had dreams for the business, but wanted to see, okay, but how do you actually get the business? Where does the business, where do the leads come from? And then, as you say, what's the journey you take someone on to actually get them to say, yes, I'm signing on the dotted line. I'm now a client.
absolutely, it's Daniel Priestley talks about leads, appointments, presentations, and sales. It's about measuring all of that and knowing where you stand and being then able to improve the sale process.
Yeah.
When I had the training business, that was a real measure that we had to put in place. How many people do you talk to? How many appointments do you get? How many sales do you get? And then when you measure anything, you can find ways to improve it.
Yeah.
So have a process, measure it, and work on it. It's a continuous and never-ending improvement. One of the key things, Leigh, that came out for me, one of the key learnings in selling was it's not about selling, it's about asking questions
Mm,
and getting the person to buy.
mm,
Um, there's a great book by Alan Pease, you've probably seen it, I'm sure, called Questions Are the Answer.
mm.
And when I did work with Robert Kiyosaki and stuff, some training with him, again, it was all about questions. So the consultative sale process,
Yes.
build the rapport, build the trust, get to understand the person's pain points, problems, and then present the solution. So it's not about selling, it's not about telling, it's about asking.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, I was just listening to an audiobook this morning. One of my friends put me onto, I think it's called The CEO's Diary, and he's literally talking again about the power of asking questions. And he tells the story of Ronald Reagan, who I think at the time was behind Jimmy Carter in the polls going into the election, but it was like a week before the election, and in the debate. He goes, look, folks, all you need to do is on the day, and I'm paraphrasing Reagan's way of putting it, but you go into the voting booth and just before you're about to, and this is, of course, NLP would call it an embedded command because he's literally painting a scenario and giving them an instruction, whether he knew he was doing it or not. But he went, I want you to go sit there with the pencil and go, is it easier to get a job now than it was 4 years ago? Is the economy better now than it was 4 years ago? Is it easier to buy food now than it was for you? Are gas prices cheaper, or is it easier to buy gas? And if the answer is no, then I think it becomes obvious what you need to do.
I love it. Yeah.
Right? It's a
Yeah.
series of questions. And of course, and as Kiyosaki coached both of us, we say, you cannot not answer a question. So the mind, in fact, there's that flip chart, isn't there? Questions hook the mind. The big fish hook. Questions
Yep.
hook the mind. And the question opens a loop in the person's mind. Again, this is NLP, and Kiyosaki and the guys use this so well. And so we, as you say, one, it's called consultative selling. Two, we actually have what we call strategic questioning and buyer facilitation. That's the whole of this POMVIC process that we've created to guide people with strategic questions, knowing that every time you ask a question, you're taking the person both intellectually, their mind is going to that place, but also emotionally they're going to that place. So if you say to them, tell me what you'd like your life to be like once you've sold your business, they've now gone to that place in their mind, and they're experiencing that place. At the same time, tell me what it's like coming to work every day right now. How's that for you? So as you say, once you understand the power of questions and the consultative sale process, and as you say, we talk about present situation, problems, pain points, plans. We go all the way through. Funnily enough, interesting, people who are even sales snobs, like could be psychologists or people who've been to university, go, well, that's essentially, as you say, consulting. You're actually getting people to discuss. In fact, I think Kiyosaki put us onto Galileo. Galileo said, you cannot teach a person anything. You can only help them discover inside for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me some of the sales experiences you've had in recent times or even over the years that you remember where you've used your sales process, and what has been some of the milestone moments that you've used, some of the key lessons that jump out for you.
Yeah. It's always asking those questions, taking them down that path of getting them to identify what they want, but why they haven't got it already. So what are the obstacles? Identify the pain. What's stopping you getting from where you are now to where you want to go? And then solve that problem for them. And quite often there'll be a generic solution, like, take vitamin C or something like that, if you're getting a cold, but then you want to talk about your specific solution. So it's not just any vitamin C, it's my vitamin C.
Yes.
So why your solution is better, and show some proof. And then, as you were saying, Leigh, it's about getting them to identify the brightness of the future. So if we do that and we solve the problems and we take you on that journey, then what's it going to be like? How would that feel? This is an ex-engineer here talking about feelings.
Yeah.
But that's in selling, and that was my big learning in selling, as we talked about before. It's not about logic, it's about emotion.
Yeah.
So getting people to see the brightness of the future, and that's exactly what Reagan did to beat Carter. He painted a picture of a brighter future, whereas Carter was talking about the realities of how tough things were going to be. Well, people don't want to know how tough things are going to be. They want to know how good it's going to be when the problem's solved.
Yes.
So in
brightness
the
brightness of the future, to which, to a certain extent, like him or hate him, Trump is good at hyping up the future. or even worse, talking about how terrible it is now, and only through him will there be a brighter future. In fact, if we don't vote for me, the whole America is finished. It's almost it's fear driven more so than brightness of the future, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fear is it gets people into action, but it's not my favorite
No,
way of going.
no.
Whereas the brightness of the future, like with selling your business, you know, and that's what I have to do sometimes to get people. So one business owner I worked with for about 2.5 years before putting the business on the market. And that was because the owner had started the business 20 years prior. And so he had all the expertise about the product. So this was, I've just got to be careful what I say.
Of course,
Obviously, but
confidentiality.
yeah, so he had all the technical knowledge about the business and the products and solutions, but he had all the relationships with the clients, with the suppliers, and it was getting him to see that and see that the business, that he could transfer all of that to someone else in the business, and with some good systems, then he could free himself up from the business, and he could start to, again, the brightness of the future, he could start to have a life and do things. And then in a couple of years' time, we could sell the business and get a good buyer for it. And he was a very coachable person, some I think we talked about this before as well. Some
Yes.
people are coachable and some aren't.
Yes.
He was very coachable, and by the end of 2.5 years, he was only going into the business a couple of half days a week, and that was more just to see if everybody was okay. And that business was sold to someone completely outside the industry, because the buyer could see the potential in the business, but could see that the business would run without them having to be the expert or having all those sort of relationships. So, but my job was to sell the owner on taking the step to go down that path.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to come back to one of your points here. We talk about in the POMVIC V is value, and part of the value component is what you do that's unique. We talk about the 4 whys. Why did you start the business? Why, in terms of where are you now? Why, what's so unique about your process? In other words, compared to others on the market. And then why should the person start now rather than in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months time? So when you cover off on those 4 whys, you start to articulate a beautiful value story. So literally, one of my clients just last week said, Leigh, can you sit in on the interviews with the final 2 candidates to be a sales manager? And again, I come straight back to all the things we teach people: process. Let's get them to tell us what they're going to bring to the table, which was revolutionary for this client. He'd never done that before. So both the candidates did a presentation. They're both good, but of course one stood out more so than the other. And this particular one that particularly stood out then said, look, do you mind if I ask you guys some questions? Which of course is what I teach people to do. If you're even going for a job, ask questions, because you want to, of course, A, you can discover a lot, and B, wow. So the guy opens up his blue notebook, and one of the things he asked me is so Leigh, what is unique about what you're doing here compared to a lot of the other sales training programs that I've been involved in? I went, oh, good question. But of course, the good thing is, of course, I've thought about this. I said, well, a lot of the other sales training programs will teach a methodology, but a methodology planted into an unhealthy culture will mean we're putting good seed on toxic soil. So what I do is we work one great methodology, but we also work with the culture and the ecosystem, so that we have a healthy, high-performing, supportive sales ecosystem, as distinct from, we teach the methodology, but the culture's sick. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I say is we also work at the personal development level, not just on sales system, because So the company grows when the people grow. So things around emotional intelligence, things around paradigms, things around goal setting, things around, inner evolution, are all the belief systems. We work with those because when we can get everyone on the same page, lifting in terms of their personal development, that in itself has a major impact on the performance. So we're actually doing it at 3 levels. As I said, the sales methodology area, the POMVIC system, which works beautifully, the culture, and being much more healthy and supportive of a high-performing sales team, but also the people growing as individuals. And of course, then I follow up with what Kiyosaki taught us, then ask the question, does that answer your question? Because he goes, yeah, that's very good, right? So, but the same thing. So if someone was going to ask you, John, in terms of, okay, what's unique about your methodology, would you say, compared to, say, other people who may be in your area coaching people on how to get their businesses ready for sale? What would you say is the unique component, and why someone might choose you over somebody else?
Yeah, that's a good question, Leigh.
Thank you.
The point is, I've been there and done it from different perspectives. So I've been a business owner, wanting to sell a business in a partnership, and went about the whole sale process wrong. So I've sort of been there and experienced what it's like to not know what you're doing when you're selling a business. And then, having gone through the process with the broker who sold our business, learned so much from that process. And then I've been out and done business broking as well. So there aren't too many people out there that have been business owners, sold their own business, been business broking, selling other people's businesses, and a whole range of businesses, from motorbike wrecking businesses to kebab businesses to auto service business, a whole raft of different businesses. So I've pretty well seen, I wouldn't say everything, but I've seen a lot of things that can happen when people are trying to sell a business, things that can go wrong, things that can go right. So, there's a lot of coaches and people out there that have learned coaching, and they may have been in business or may have been an accountant, but haven't been through that actual sales process themselves.
So it really is a 360-degree approach, isn't it? You've had experience from all those areas. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't bag accountants or anybody like that when it comes to selling businesses, but quite often accountants get involved because most businesses have an accountant. But the accountants themselves have never, I'm being careful here, Leigh, but sold a business, having been a business owner and sold a business. So yes, they understand all the financials. They understand sometimes how businesses are valued and that, but when it comes to the actual selling of it, they haven't been out there on the streets, knocking on doors and finding buyers and negotiating deals, things like that, which I have. So does that answer your question, Leigh?
Yeah, beautifully done, mate. As you say, is a whole range of levels between the psychological, the emotional, the systems, the sales, and just the experience of, as you say, everything from kebab to all the range of businesses, which reminds me, you mentioned Proof. I was doing some you talked about that, leads, appointments, presentation, sales. I was doing what we call a needs discovery, in fact, a proposal presentation to an accountant the other day. And one of his first questions, or early on in the questions, was, what other accountants have you worked with? People want to know, who like me have you helped? Yes, you've helped all these other people, but who like me have you helped? And that's where your broad range of experience is going to be a pretty good chance you've helped someone either in that industry or with a business very similar to that business, which I think, we do so many things in business. Sometimes you forget the gravitas or the importance of a particular factor. And this factor of, yeah, oh, you've done all these other things, mate, but who like me have you helped? And being able to actually articulate the reason why someone should do business with you, so that it fits their world and their reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's what do you call it? Walking in their moccasins or something.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
You know, having been there and experienced it with people like them in their particular industry or something similar, to be able to relate to them
Mm.
with that experience. I was just trying to think. There's the other thing that comes up quite often is family businesses,
Hmm.
and I've worked with quite a few family businesses, and when I had the training and development business as well, a lot of our clients were quite large WA-based family businesses. But again, when it comes to, you were talking about culture and that in a family business, um, it can be quite difficult when it comes to sell if there are two or three members in the business. So, Leigh, yeah, I know you work very well on developing cultures, and I don't know if you've got experience with family businesses, but it's getting the family to talk
Mm.
and actually get
Mm.
on the same page.
Mm.
Have you come
The
across that?
dynamics are very complicated, aren't they? Because you have situation, like I'll give an example. A guy running a business, he's inherited the business from his father, and his wife, the guy's wife, says she's not involved directly in the business, but does control all the finances, and in fact is very involved. And so, on the one hand, it's like he runs it, except when I have a decision that needs to be made. And I can see the dynamics are very complicated because as long as it's going along the way she wants it, then that's good. And I can see, well, then there's a son involved as well. And I'm thinking of other family business as well. It's not your normal corporate business, is it? A family business. There's all of those personalities. And as you say, they eat, often they live together, they eat, they may even holiday together. And so to a certain extent, a cough can end up like pneumonia. A small problem becomes a big problem. So tell me, what are some of your secrets in dealing? Because I note one of our points here is family businesses when the baby boomer wants to retire, but has sons or daughters with different ideas about the future of the business. What has been some of your insights or tips or strategies in that situation?
Yeah, tips. I would say there are people out there who specialize in helping coaching family businesses. And I would strongly recommend getting somebody to help because it's it's almost like counseling. You got to get the family to talk to each other to agree. So the things you would do in a business without the family members is the business owner or owners have a vision and a culture that they develop for that business. In a family business, it tends to evolve, and it evolves around the family members. And if you don't get them talking about where they're going with the business, getting them all to agree, it's like a partnership, Leigh.
Mm.
Partnerships will work providing the partners have a common goal, a common vision for where the business is going, and agree on that and work on that and have the same values. In a family business, because you do have the sometimes, well, generational problems, the youngsters don't want to, they've seen their parents working long hours, building this business up, and now they're going to inherit the business and they don't necessarily want to be doing the long hours and having the same sort of life that their parents have had. But so, Leigh, it's all about getting that conversation going.
Yeah.
And I like to not get involved in those sort of conversations. So my
Well, at least you know what you
advice,
don't. At least you know what you don't like doing. Right. So,
exactly, and there are people out there who specialize in doing that
yep.
kind of consulting, if you like, that kind of coaching. So my advice is always to do that, and it's getting them to think about maybe getting some of the family members to leave the business and replace them before selling it, because it does make the business more difficult to sell, less attractive if there are 2 or 3 or more family members in the business, because it doesn't matter how much you try to convince a potential buyer. No, the son and the daughter will stay in the business and everything else and stuff. But in the buyer's mind, it's, oh yeah, sure, but as soon as the business is sold, are they really going to stay? And particularly if you've got multiple owners in the family, that it becomes a difficult one. So it's my job is to open up the eyes for the owner or owners that this is going to be a challenge. Now let's work out how we're going to address that challenge. What would the family members like to do after the sale? So it's about having conversations. And if it's not going to look like an easy job, then I'll refer them to an expert on that. I'll refer them to you, Leigh.
Well, you're reminding me,
them.
mate, what you're doing is you're taking me back to a time I was working with a family business, and I'll never forget the meeting we had. It was a weekend workshop we did down at the Atrium Hotel in is it the Atrium? It was either Mandurah or Bunbury, and literally, I said, I knew there were all these issues going on about different visions for the business, and how the money that was locked up in the business was actually going to be a superannuation fund for the owners. And I said, this is a bolt the door meeting. This is a bolt the door meeting, because again, Kiyosaki taught us about perturbation, and how do we create a safe environment to actually do what do I feel like saying, and where are we heading? Let's start with the end in mind here. And mate, it got hot. It got hot in that kitchen. But as a result of that conversation, a whole range of decisions were made, which, as you have made the point there, I think 1 or 2 of the family members over the next 12 months left the business, which then did make it way more saleable. And that conversation, I'm sure if I go back, that would have been 20 years ago now, but if I go back to the owners, millions and millions of dollars were unlocked as a result of the sale of that business. They could trace it back to that bolt the door meeting, where critical decisions, which really they'd been walking around and avoiding conversations around, but you've got to build enough trust in the place to go, one, let's understand the concept of perturbation, because right now something has to pop, and there will be emotion. Let's not be afraid of the emotion that's going to come up. But if we do, as Kiyosaki taught us, done in an environment of love and support, the pop will occur, there will be emotion, but on the other side of it will be a better outcome. And to a certain extent, so as you know, sometimes you don't know what the pop's going to be. But if we say, let's bolt the door so that we can deal with this once and for all, people may not have been happy on the day, but within 12 months, everyone's lives had moved on, and the business did realize its full potential, and it did unlock the value and the money that was in there, which then allowed the owners some of them to retire the way they wanted to retire. So you're right, it is a speciality, and in most cases, that won't be your accountant that's going to run that meeting, because it's not about the spreadsheet. It's actually about the humans in the process that create that spreadsheet. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And this is why I would refer that sort of situation to somebody like yourself, who's prepared to take people through that process. That's not my area of expertise. I'm an analyst. I'm a data and facts person, ex-engineer.
Yeah.
So, no, I would refer them to someone like yourself.
Yep.
So,
great. Let's talk about another one here that we touched on in terms of our bullet points, similar but different, but in business partnerships where there's either alignment or lack of alignment, what do you do, and what's been your experience, and what's some of your insights or tips in that regard?
Yeah, well, it's exactly the same as the family business situation, Leigh, that the conversations need to be had. I find I love doing strategic planning exercises with businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have a look. And when there's a partnership, is getting them to think about what's the business going to look like when it's finished or running perfectly or ready for sale. What is the finish point? What's the end game? And this is such a critical thing to do, I find, with partners, is to get them to have that conversation. And sometimes you even need to have it individually, because sometimes people will say things just because they think it's what the other person wants to hear. You know, and I've seen a couple of partnerships recently break up because when I started them down that 2 to 3 year strategic planning process, it became evident fairly early that the partners had a different vision of what the business would look like in 2 or 3 years' time, and what they wanted to get out of it. So whether it's family or whether it's partners are like family, you know. So the secret to success in a partnership is getting total agreement on why are we in this business, what's the end point, what do we want out of it at the end, and having a good set of common values so that the culture and the value set is in place. All the partners are bought into that, and that everybody understands what the other person wants out of it. So, you know, classic case recently, the partners just had totally different reasons for having the business.
Right.
It sounds, I don't know, it sounds like unbelievable almost, but you know, the business had been going for quite a few years, become very successful. But it wasn't until I started asking the questions, we come back to the questions thing, and getting them to think down the track, that they realized they had whole different reasons for being in business.
Wow. Wow. Talk about alignment, which again, I think Kiyosaki taught us clarity is power. Where there's lack of clarity, you don't have power. And by asking those questions, you're helping to establish the clarity so we can actually all get on the same page. Or as again, we learned from Kiyosaki, synergy, synchronized energy. How do we have alignment of energy, synchronized energy versus asynchronous energy? And essentially that's what we're talking about, is it? Talk about engineering, the waveform. You want the wave moving in the same, at the same, as close as possible in alignment versus crash, 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 and then wondering why you're not making progress.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right, unbelievable. So, as you say, and it starts, as you say, with strategic planning. But I love those questions. What's the business look like when it's finished? What's the business look like when it's running perfectly? What's the end game here? What do you personally want out of this? Boy, oh boy, as you say, which is so, as I've learned over the years, it's so easy to jump into a business partnership with someone and up you get, off you go, running around doing things. And then it's down the track, you go, hang on, this guy's different values than me. What he considers truth, I don't consider truth. What he considers good behavior or friendly behavior or business behavior, I don't consider friendly or good business behavior. You know, what I consider to be a way of solving a problem, he doesn't consider, or she doesn't consider it a way of resolving a problem, whether it be avoiding the problem or just insulting the person into some kind of conversation. Because as soon as you put, and again coming back to the family business or any business, as soon as it's personality dependent, or even worse, where personality dominates, particularly in a very unhealthy way, now you've got asynchronous, now you've got toxicity. And one, it's not fun. In fact, this is a question I asked myself. One of my friends, who's a brand strategist, and we're talking about brand energy, in the conversations we were doing in a series of workshops, it got down to, is there flow? What's the flow in the business partnership? Well, there is no flow. If anything, we're swimming against the current with each other. Our finances, are we making money? No, we're not making much money out of this at all. And is it any fun? Well, it's like, if it's not fun and there's no real financial reward and there's no flow, what the hell are you doing in it? And as you said before, if a person's not coachable, and again, within the context of the relationship, are there open coaching two-way dialogues, or is it an ego fight or clash? Well, they're not coachable. They're not going to take feedback. The power structure's all wrong. Well, good night, sweetheart. It's got to be over. One, it's no
Yeah.
good for your health, and two, it's no good for your finances. So, or your life. So what are you doing in it? So you getting in there with the strategic planning and hopefully ironing out small wrinkles as distinct from big wrinkles. Although sometimes, if the small wrinkles have gone on long enough, they are big. They are big wrinkles. Yeah, I'm sure you've had that over the years, have you, John?
Yeah. It starts off being small differences, but then when you start to get that clarity by asking the questions and getting people to articulate these things, that's when you see the differences. That's when you see the gaps opening up.
Yeah.
And you start to realize that this is really not going to work. And the other thing is assumptions, Leigh. The old maxim, never assume. And you get partners in a business will assume the other partner agrees. They assume the other partner wants this outcome, and they never ask each other the question.
Yeah.
It's not until somebody like I come in or you come in and start to question them that clarity starts to come through.
Yes.
And the sooner they get that clarity, the better.
Yeah.
And even assume, I assume when I'm doing a business ready for sale assessment for a business owner that at some point they're going to want to sell the business. Now, I was given a little bit of a sort of a wake-up call on that one recently, where after quite a period of time working with them, the owners said, well, actually, we were thinking we might want to pass this business on to our employees, or we might even want to turn it into a co-op, which is a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
To selling the business. Now I just assumed that, well, at some point they're going to want to sell the business.
Yeah.
No, we'd like to get, suppliers and clients, people involved to buy in and maybe turn it into a co-op.
Wow.
Well, that changes the whole
Absolutely.
thinking
Changes the whole ball game, which again is why you want to do that strategic planning part of your process to go, well, what does the business look like when it's finished or when it's ready for sale, et cetera, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you want out of it down the track? And another question to add to that list, Leigh, is what do you want to do after the sales or after the exit? When you're out of the business, what are you going to do?
Because life beyond. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm sure you do that with people, it's getting them to, particularly with males and older males, that where the business has been their life. It's like, once the business is gone, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to spend your time doing?
Well, it's not just time, but they think it's time. But the fact is, it's identity. If for 30 or 40 years I've been a business person, or I've been a printer, or I've been an accountant, or I've been a lawyer, or I've been whatever, and that's been your source of, self-esteem, or that's been your source of joy, or that's been your source of pride. Your kids have grown up. Your partner could be doing their own thing anyway. What are you going to? How many hours a week are you going to be at the golf course? Oh, yeah, sure. But we've seen that before, where literally I've heard stories where guys sold their business. They play golf. They're sitting on their boat, and their wife eventually says, "Can you please go back to work? Because you're just under my feet and you're so annoying." And basically the guys get grumpy, even though they thought playing golf and sitting on the boat and going fishing and pulling the pots every day was going to do it. Well, we think back, Kerry Packer. Kerry Packer did it. He wanted to play polo and go gambling and do all these things. And eventually, particularly I think after he had that heart attack, he's got I get the biggest thrill making deals happen and making things happen. And I mean, Stan Perrin was in his 80s, late 80s, going to work 3 days a week in the office in Perth. And here we have Rupert Murdoch, even now in his 90s, who I think just got remarried again. So whether he thinks he's 18 again, I don't know. But, here are people who are well and truly could have retired and played golf and sat on their boats forever. But somehow they've contemplated, well, I actually prefer continuing to look at Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett says, what does he say? I dance to work each day. And there he is in his 80s. So you just give me your comments and thoughts on that. What's been your experience or lessons or insights you've gained from seeing people either sell and either be lost afterwards or sell and be very happy afterwards? Or what are some of the examples you've seen there?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, you didn't mention John Hughes, but he's another one that.
No, I didn't. John Hughes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, being a local example. Yeah, look, with the business I was talking about before, where I worked with them for 2.5 years and then sold the business, that very early on in the piece, and this is what I like to do again, is getting that clarity, is getting people to articulate what they are going to do after the business. Now, in that particular case, the owner came up with some really good things that they wanted to do in terms of helping other people, working for not-for-profits, giving back, if you like, because not having to work for an income and things like that. So it was about giving back and yeah, not-for-profits. And having caught up with that owner recently, that's exactly what he's done. And it's fulfilling, giving him a fulfilled retirement. It's helping other people. There's all sorts of examples. I can also, when I was broking, it wasn't a client of mine, but a client of one of the other brokers. It got to the point of a sale for this particular lady, and she got the broker to get her out of the sale agreement, which can be quite hard to do, because she couldn't give up her baby. She didn't know what was going to happen afterwards. And in fact, that happened twice with that same person. It seems incredible, but they just couldn't let go in the end.
Yeah.
I always say you've got to retire to something, not from something.
Oh, nice. Retire too. Absolutely.
I know an airline pilot worked for British Airways. He was a relative of mine, actually, but he was visiting us in Oz one time and stressing to the max because he was coming up to retirement, because they retire airline pilots quite early for obvious reasons. And he was stressed to the max. He did not want to retire. So I started questioning him about what are some of the things he could do if he wasn't flying planes. And most of the time they're sitting reading books, not doing much on international long distance flight. Anyway, and he started to think about it. And after a while he said, I'd love to play the violin. I'd love to learn to play the violin. And I don't know if it was golf or tennis he wanted to take up. And then he had another thought and he said, I could start a flying training school. He said, with all the experience I've got, he said, I could maybe go and work for a flying training school and then start my own and everything else. Anyway, by the time they left us, he was now looking forward to retirement.
Oh, mate, nice.
So I'm taking a little bit of credit for that, but it really highlighted to me how that change of mindset from retiring from something to retiring to something is just absolutely critical. And I see it all the time with business owners, the mature age business owners, is so when I start the process with them of like doing the business ready for sale assessment, one of my questions on my questionnaire is, what do you want to do after your exit? and start the thinking process again. It's getting people to think. It's not
Because-
rocket science, Leigh. It's just getting people to think.
No, exactly. Because if they only go, they've sold it. Now what? It's like, wow. I mean, literally, as we was talking, I was on a phone this morning. My best man from my wedding, Max Jan. Jan sold their financial planning business in Geelong. They've been to Europe a few times. They're up in the northern part of Australia at the moment, so they're still in the kind of travel after sale phase. And another friend of mine, Michael, is in Europe right now. He sold his business, and he's in the travel after sale. But it's like, okay, when I've done the travel, what next? When I've done the trip around Australia, when I've done the trip to Europe, what next? And so I think that's a super important point in terms of what am I retiring? What am I retiring to? John, I'm conscious of the time, mate. I'm going to go through my notes here. In fact, I'm just going to go through the notes. There's so many great points we've got in no particular order here. The two late calls you've talked about, the importance of strategic planning. What's the business look like when it's finished? What's it look like when it's running perfectly? What's the end game? What's this one? Oh, the brightness of the future. Again, we've talked so much about the power of questions and that consultative sales process, asking questions around how will that feel for you? You talked about the importance of a structured, documented sales process that you can also measuring number of leads, measuring appointments, measuring presentations, measuring the actual conversion, and even things like, as you say, how many people have you spoken to this week? As Tom Hopkins talks about getting belly to belly. Alan Peace, questions are the answer. And the important point of be coachable, be coachable. You talked about your specific solution, why it's so unique, and then the proof of stories. You've got story after story, which is so important. People having, we call it strategic storytelling, strategic proof. The importance, and as you say, family businesses and the unique challenges that go on in those family businesses, and the importance of that conversation. Folks, where do we want this to go? What do you want out of it personally? And see how the business makes its sales. See how the business actually can, like, as you say, if the buyer can't see how the business makes its money, how the business generates leads and then converts to keep the sales pipeline full, that's not going to be so exciting. And then that point you've made here, retiring to something, not from something. What's life beyond sale look like, mate? There's a wealth of fantastic points there. Is there anything we haven't spoken about that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up this interview?
I think the point I'd want to make with business owners is start thinking about it now.
Yes.
Start early. I can't remember who the famous person was now, whether it was Ford or somebody said, thinking is the hardest work there is, which is why so few people do it. I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was who said that, but because the brain tends to take the easy route, so all the subconscious habits that we've built up in our mind will take over. It's autopilot, so to take that conscious decision to have a different thought is hard work.
And it means starting with the question, as you said, the power of the question. What does the business look like when it's finished? What does the business look like when it's running perfectly? Henry Ford also said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, it doesn't matter. Either way, you're right. Either way, you're right. And so here, whether you think about the business being finished and running perfectly or don't, either way, you're going to have an outcome. Best you plan it and think about it. And as you say, the brightness of the future. What does a bright future look like beyond you being in this business? At least spend some time meditating and contemplating that possibility.
And don't start the sale process until you are absolutely ready. A, the business is ready, and B, you are mentally ready. And that's where my business ready for sale assessment comes in.
Yes.
Is to go through that. Let's have a look at it before you start the process.
Well, there it is there. That's your side. There it is. Will your business sell? Free assessment. There it is. How to sell a business and keep it ready for sale. A business that's ready for sale is well worth keeping. So that's how they get hold of you, John, isn't it?
Absolutely.
JohnDenton.com.au. And there it is, a fantastic website. Will work with me if beautiful, mate. That's beautiful. So many great points there. So, folks, that's how you get on. I don't know when that photo was taken, but you've got to thank that photographer. Good work, buds. Yeah, there it is. There, Paul Richardson. Well done, Paul. You've made him look young, fit, handsome, vibrant. That's a very good photo, mate. I like that. You pay him again. That's a good job. There it is. No obligation chat, audit, and plan about, mate. Beautiful, great website. Gee, that's very good, very good. Folks, so there it is, John. What a fantastic time we've had. I bet we'll come up with other ideas again as to why we should keep talking, mate. But I do thank you for your time this morning. So many great points. And folks, touch base with John if you, well, as you said, start now. I'm not saying, I was going to say touch base if you're thinking of selling. No, touch base, because one day you will want to sell. And the point being, if you can't sell it, it's not a business, it's just an income, and possibly even a prison. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't get trapped in the business. Be in control. And remember, a business that's ready for sale is well worth keeping.
Oh, mate, I love the way you do. This guy's a professional, folks. John, thanks for your time again, mate. And I look forward to seeing you very soon again. All the best.
Yeah, thank you, Leigh.
Pleasure,
Talk
mate.
soon.
Pleasure,
Bye.
mate. Bye.